you're not late at all. We're just getting started. In terms of the adoption curve, we're still in the innovators phase. We haven't even reached the early adopter phase yet. Having these other layers that allow people to transact, first of all, faster, cheaper, and then with much, much greater privacy, that's incredibly important. If you own even a few sats right now, just a few sats, you own more Bitcoin than 99% plus of all the publicly traded companies in the world. You shouldn't have to have a second job where you're just watching charts and trading nonstop just to try to make a couple extra percentage points. What kind of life is that? I'll need to do some ASMR in the future, in between regular episodes. Who knows? Maybe there's an interesting niche, a good way to bring in the ASMR community and orange pill them to Bitcoin, perhaps. Who knows? The only reason that real estate holds $370 trillion is because our money is so broken. People have to look for different places to put their capital. Nobody can stop you from using it. Nobody can stop you from transacting in it. That alone, I think, is worth a far larger percent of the total $1,000 trillion in global assets.
Hi, Walker. How are you doing? Everything fine on your end?
I'm doing great, Robin. Good to be back on your show.
Absolutely. It was a pleasure talking with you first, and I always have this. I think I made the compliment last time, but I will just do it again. You have the best podcasting voice ever. So thank you so much for I think someone has actually said like Bitcoin ASMR when Walker is on the podcast.
You know, I've had a number of people ask me about doing that. Like you should do, Bitcoin ASMR or like, before bed Bitcoin videos. And I'm like, I don't, it's like, I guess if I'm, the voice puts you to sleep in a good way, that's a good thing. As long as I'm not putting you to sleep because of the show is so boring. But yeah, who knows? Maybe I'll need to do some ASMR in the future, in between regular episodes. Who knows? Maybe there's an interesting niche, a good way to bring in the ASMR community and orange pill them to Bitcoin, perhaps. Who knows?
That's true. But for the few people that haven't been around your content and haven't seen anything of you, maybe give us some overview of like who you are and especially why you're excited about Bitcoin.
Yeah. So my name is Walker. I'm Walker America on X. I'm Walker on Noster. I'm Walker in real life as well. I got started in Bitcoin just studying it like most people after ignoring it multiple times over many years. And then finally started going down the rabbit hole kind of during COVID. I think a lot of people did the same thing. My wife and I, she's Carla Bitcoin. She kept her maiden name of Bitcoin, of course. We're very progressive like that. I jest, but we both started making Bitcoin related content together during the pandemic. And we did that kind of as just a creative outlet for us. Like it was kind of during the bear market. People were very sad. And we were like, people need to lighten up a little bit. So let's bring them some joy. She's got a great voice. So she did some songs as well, all sorts of things. So that's how we kind of, I guess, blew up a little bit and got fairly well known in the space for a couple of court jesters. And then when she got pregnant with our son, she kind of wanted to take a step back. She was the real brains behind our content creation operation, doing all the editing, all of that. And so I wasn't about to learn Final Cut. And so I was like, well, what do I do now? Well, I guess like every other, Bitcoin bro of a certain age, I should just start a Bitcoin podcast. So I did. And now, here I am, I guess, almost 2 years into the podcast now, I think, if I'm doing it. That sounds crazy to say, but yeah, I guess so. Almost 2 years into the podcast, which is kind of wild. Time flies in the Bitcoin space, but it also moves strangely slowly. I don't know, but yeah, you can just do things. You can just create stupid content, make people laugh. You can just start a podcast. You can just do whatever you want. And Bitcoin enables some pretty amazing things and brings great people together, which is why I'm, happy to have met you through this thing. We wouldn't even know each other if it wasn't for some anonymous developer who created magic internet money. How cool is that?
And this just two things always reminds me of Bitcoin, because you can just put a white paper out there and revolutionize finance forever. that's pretty remarkable.
It's incredible. And I mean, we need more of that attitude. I think it's very easy to be passive and to just wait for the world to kind of happen to you. There's that expression, some people, make things happen. Some people watch things happen. And then there's the rest of the people who wonder what happened. You want to be part of that first group, the part that, makes things happen. It's a much better experience of this world we're living in.
Yeah, there's this equation of how much are you producing versus how much are you consuming, and we all are producers and consumers at the same time. Like I guess most of us are. I don't know if there's any extreme, but there is a thing where you want to be as much on the producing side as possible, even if you're retired and have a lot of money. I think it's not good to just consume. I think it's always you should have some outlet. And if this is, I don't know, you're like painting pictures all day long, you're producing at that point. It's like producing doesn't mean you have to make money with it. You just like, you should produce something. So I feel like producing is something extremely, it's well conversed in the Bitcoin verse. Like it's a proof of work thing. It's a good thing, and I think Bitcoiners understand that more than anyone else. That producing is a good thing and proof of work is a good thing, and being as little as possible on the consuming side is probably a good thing.
I think that it's so true, and you have such incredible evidence of this from people who were early adopters of Bitcoin too. People who, by all rights, have a massive fortune in Bitcoin, but still decide to work in the Bitcoin space, still decide to start companies or invest in companies. They decide to write code. They decide to keep building, even though they could probably go and buy their own private island and retire somewhere, sail off into the sunset. That sounds good in theory, but I think especially, for men, we have a desire to want to keep producing things. We want to keep building. And you see this, I can think of, I'm sure you can as well, so many examples of this in the Bitcoin space. People have been around for, from long before you or I heard of Bitcoin, and have been stacking the whole way and producing value the whole way, and have no plans to stop doing that. If anything, they're speeding up, and we need that kind of energy, that builder mentality, whether you're building a podcast or you're building, open source code, or you're building, I don't know, a new political party. Like all of these things are building, and I think we need as much of that as possible. And it makes me very hopeful for the future that so many Bitcoiners, like the early Bitcoiners and a lot of the Bitcoiners now, have that mentality of keep building, don't stop building, and build stuff that actually matters, helps educate, helps free people. It makes me very bullish on the future of humanity.
An amazing example is just your previous guest that came on the podcast. He built a Bitcoin exchange in 2012 and wrote his first Bitcoin book in 2012. And now he brings out a new book and he's still doing the company. And I'm like, he's here for 14 years. I'm pretty sure he's doing okay financially if he's in Bitcoin for so long, even if you've lost a bunch. And then it's like, yeah, he just want to produce more. He just likes doing the things, and it's not about the money anymore. It's about the work itself. It's about the fulfillment about it. That's a really a Bitcoiner thing. And it's like people also, like you have it, you see it definitely. This retire on Bitcoin is very popular. And I always remind people, retirement is not about laying on the beach. It's about freedom, about not having the fiat job anymore, but like focusing on whatever you want to do. And if you love your fiat job, like, go ahead. Like that's your retirement. If you stand up in the morning and you can't wait to go to work and it has nothing to do with Bitcoin, like you are retired. Like that's the dream. Like that's what everyone wants. I think that's just great to have that.
I think that's such a great point. It's a retirement, retirement. We've been told it's just about, like you said, sitting on a beach or, playing golf all day. And, I know people in my personal, like fiat life that have tried to do that and then ended up going back and wanting to work more because you find out that, you need something more. And people that retire and then just kind of languish in their retirement end up like dying earlier. Like that's, because the human being needs purpose. I think we crave it. And so with Bitcoin, it allows you to have that freedom over your time. Like you said, I think this is such a brilliant thing. You can be, quote, retired while still working on things because what you're working on, you actually enjoy, you love. It brings you fulfillment. It brings others value. And it's really just about having the freedom to work on what you want to work on and not being, a slave having the whip of some other, fiat master cracking it, over the top of you. Like that's really what it comes down to.
And there's some pretty fascinating studies on that. I think it was 7 years or like something like that. The years after retirement, on average, how long people live is fascinating small. And this is really, and I've seen that on a personal level, with in my family, where once people no longer do anything, it's just waiting for death, and then death comes a lot quicker if you wait around for death. If you just don't do anything and you don't, like, I have one grandpa and he is still out there and he does his woodwork, and he looks like he's healthier than some 50-year-old, and he's like 70, and so like this is the way of like making sure you're still fit in your old age, where use the brain of yours, use that footwork of yours and all those things. It's a weird start to a Bitcoin podcast, but I like it.
Me too.
But we talked about before, like about what topics we might can touch on today, and I think one thing is really interesting, this topic of like how early we are, because right now we're entering kind of a bull phase where we get more and more people outside of our Bitcoiner crew reaching out to us and saying like, hey, like, what is this Bitcoin thing? And I already got some question of like, am I not too late? And like now Donald Trump is in there and like we're over 100K, like how high can it go? 200,000 maybe? And this is something I get pretty commonly. So I feel like that could be a hurdle now for people just because they have the number. I mean, unit bias, like it's weird, but how do you look at being early in Bitcoin when we're already 16 years in, the president is talking about it and we are over 100K?
Yeah, I think that's a natural reaction for people, right? I can see why they would think that, because I still, I haven't been in Bitcoin very long, only a few years, but I still am earlier than somebody who is joining, just starting to stack sats today, right? Early is a relative term. Like there's always going to be someone, unless you're Satoshi, there was always somebody who was into Bitcoin before you were. That's just the reality of it, right? And so trying to benchmark yourself against other people in terms of earliness, well, they bought it at 300 or they bought it 3,000 or 30,000 or 300,000 in the future, that's just going to be a recipe for unhappiness. What you should do is try to focus on you yourself, what you can accomplish, what value you can create, back to that conversation, to figure out how can I stack as many sats as humanly possible so that I can ultimately have that freedom over my time in the future, because you probably don't have it now. And for perspective on just how early we are, there's a great chart. I always love to share this with people, especially if they bring up this question of, am I too late? And it's a chart that Jesse Myers Croesus put out that basically shows the total wealth of the world, total global asset value. And the total global asset value right now is $1,000 trillion, 1,000 trillion. That is an unfathomably large number. And with Bitcoin, okay, it's at $100 and some thousand per coin right now. That may seem very expensive until you look at it from the perspective of the total addressable market of Bitcoin, which is all the assets, all the wealth in the world. Bitcoin is only around $2 trillion versus 1,000 trillion of total global asset value. So that's 0.2% of all the world's wealth is currently in Bitcoin. 0.2%, not even 0.25%. That's insane. That's so very tiny. Gold is 22 trillion, right? So over 10 times Bitcoin right now. Arts, cars, collectibles of different sorts, they're 27 trillion maybe. And then you look at the equities market, that's 135 trillion. Real estate, 370 trillion versus Bitcoin, only 2 trillion. Bonds, 318 trillion. And then overall just money, fiat money, currency, 129 trillion. So again, $1,000 trillion in total global asset value. Bitcoin is 2 trillion, 0.2% of that. I don't know how you can possibly look at that and say, I'm late. Like, you're not late at all. We're just getting started in terms of the adoption curve, we're still in the innovators phase. We haven't even reached the early adopter phase yet. You know this because still just such a tiny, tiny fraction of people own Bitcoin. Another way to look at this, there's like 60,000 publicly traded companies in the world, something around there, give or take, 60,000. The companies that currently hold Bitcoin on their balance sheet, it's like less than 150. 60,000 companies versus less than 150. If you own even a few sats right now, just a few sats, you own more Bitcoin than 99% plus of all the publicly traded companies in the world. That's not even to get into how can you look at these numbers and say, I'm too late? So I would encourage people, don't measure Bitcoin by this dollar stick, this dollar ruler, right? It's a terrible way to measure it. Measure it versus what is all of the market that Bitcoin is going to completely suck into this black hole, because that's what's happening. Bitcoin is gobbling up all of the value that is put into these terrible instruments that don't actually work, these instruments that only hold so much value because our fiat system is so broken, like real estate. $370 trillion of the total global asset value is in real estate, 2 trillion in Bitcoin. The only reason that real estate holds $370 trillion is because our money is so broken. People have to look for different places to put their capital, and they put it in real estate into second, third, fourth, fifth, 10th homes because the money's broken and it's not a reliable store of value. Fiat currency is a terrible store of value. So they look for alternates. Real estate is one of those. But real estate's not a good store of value either. Buildings fall apart. They deteriorate. Your home is not an asset. It's a liability. Like Bitcoin is an asset. It's a pristine asset. It also happens to be completely uncensorable, distributed around the entire globe. It's completely decentralized, and it allows you to send value across the internet to anyone at any time for any reason, and no one can stop you. So in addition to being completely finite, 21 million, that's all that'll ever exist. Nobody can stop you from using it. Nobody can stop you from transacting in it. That alone, I think, is worth a far larger percent of the total $1,000 trillion in global assets than the current 0.2% that Bitcoin's worth. Imagine when Bitcoin's worth 1%. Imagine when it's worth 5, 10, 20. What total percent of the global assets should Bitcoin be? I don't know, but I know that it's a lot higher than 0.2%.
Money is 50% of every transaction. So what about 50%?
That sounds good to me. That sounds great to me. We've got a long way to go.
It's super interesting when you break it down really, really good. Like I love how you break it down and show it. And for the people that saw the chart, it was an older chart. So your numbers that you mentioned were a little bit higher than the chart I showed, because my chart from Jesse Myers was with 900 trillion. So it's a little bit on the old. I think he updated that a few months ago, or this year somewhere. But it's interesting when you think about how early we are, because there are two things that I always mention. The first thing is, go out on the street and ask 100 random strangers what Bitcoin is. And if they can answer that nicely, ask them, what is the difficulty adjustment? What is a UTXO? And what's the block size? If they can answer those three questions, that's great. But I don't think you will find one person. You have to ask a lot of people to find one person that can answer those questions in a good way. And that's not about opinions, answering the question of what is a Bitcoin UTXO? That's just facts. There's no opinion in that. And they're okay, not even most Bitcoiners, I think, can answer those questions. If you make a survey on Coinbase and may send that test out to most Bitcoiners, I think most people wouldn't even be able to answer that. So we have a situation where this is the most obvious thing right now to do, and we can go into the reasons why Bitcoin is so obvious and why it will be developing like that. But then you also have the same time this obvious thing nobody understands and nobody is educated on, and nobody is paying attention as much as they should. This is just the most asymmetric bet I've ever seen in my whole life.
I couldn't agree more. And it's, I think that's why people like you and I and all the other educators and podcasters and things out there who, there are a lot of people writing code, and that's great. And we need as many of those as possible. But I think that the education piece here is still so important from a general adoption standpoint. Like, companies are buying Bitcoin. Nation states are and will continue to buy Bitcoin. Everybody from the individual to the company to the pension fund to the nation state, everybody to the AI agents, like everybody will want Bitcoin because Bitcoin is winning. And so what I view as really important right now is to try and educate as many people as possible, to try and put out. That's why we always need more Bitcoin podcasts, because there's so much bad information out there about finance and about investing and all these things. And they make it so unnecessarily complicated. And I think that's one of the reasons you see, financial advisors, financial planners, whatever they are, typically they've been very, very reticent to recommend Bitcoin exposure because it's risky. And that doesn't fit our, that's not something that we recommend at our firm. That tide is shifting a little bit now, right? But the reason is because it's just so simple. Like, you can just create value for society, take the infinitely printable paper money that you've received for that value, and you can buy the only provably scarce asset in the history of mankind with that printed paper money. That's incredible. And then you can just wait. You can just hold on to it. I try to spend Bitcoin too. I spend Bitcoin every day when I zap sats on Nostr. I try to spend Bitcoin at merchants. I try to spend Bitcoin whenever I'm around Bitcoiners and spend it online. There's a lot of ways to do that now. But even if you're just holding it, you are going to outperform the vast majority of the best hedge funds and asset managers and financial planners in the entire world, just by doing this one simple trick. Like for getting incredibly wealthy is to create value, save the value of your time and energy in Bitcoin, and then live your life. Like, that's what money is not the end in and of itself. Money is a means to the end. The end is having the freedom over your time, the freedom to take care of your family, the freedom to provide a life for yourself and for your loved ones that is the one that you want, and not the one that somebody else is forcing you to have because you're living on a broken money standard. When you live on a sound money standard, when you live on a Bitcoin standard, everything gets cheaper forever. When you live on a broken money fiat standard, everything gets more expensive forever. Which one would you rather have? And if you ask that question, the choice should be really obvious. And that's why I think, again, education is so important, because we need to get this message to as many people as can possibly hear it. Because again, the institutions aren't coming anymore, they're here. The nation states aren't just coming anymore, they're here. Individuals are still have the chance to front run all of these corporations, all of these nation states. Like, you should take that chance, take that opportunity and save in Bitcoin, and your life will get better because of it.
You can still buy 0.01 Bitcoin and have more Bitcoin than Germany.
Yeah. Yep. Which I think, which is a great thing. That's going to be looked back on. The history books will write about it as a catastrophic blunder that was worth unimaginable. The opportunity cost of that blunder was massive. So, yeah. But again, that freed up some more sats for the average individual. So I think that's a good thing.
How do you actually look at nations buying Bitcoin? I mean, it's a small thing right now. Like most nations just confiscate Bitcoin. That's not really meaning buying Bitcoin. But America might do it, especially now as they got to know they have less Bitcoin than they think, than they thought they have. Is that something? I mean, obviously it's inevitable. Like, at some point, everyone will buy Bitcoin, also nation states. But is that something that fits into the Bitcoin ethos?
I think whether or not it fits into the Bitcoin ethos is kind of it's the wrong question. Maybe I think that, as you said, nation states buying Bitcoin is inevitable. Countries buying Bitcoin is inevitable. Anyone from the individual up to the nation state level, everyone is going to want Bitcoin because Bitcoin is winning. Now, if Bitcoin was losing, if Bitcoin was not, eating the world right now, No, nation states wouldn't care. They wouldn't want it. Companies wouldn't care. They wouldn't want it. People wouldn't care. They wouldn't want it. But Bitcoin is winning. Bitcoin is winning, and it's happening, gradually, and then it will happen very, very suddenly. And as Bitcoin reprices the entire world, because it is the only measuring stick that actually makes sense. It's the only measuring stick that maintains its length. It's 21 million. Every fiat measuring stick just expands and expands and bloats. How can you measure the value of your time and energy with that? You can't. You can't make economic calculations when your monetary measuring stick continues to grow. It just doesn't make any sense. And so I think, people are right to be, let's say, wary of nation states getting into Bitcoin, but it's important to remember that Bitcoin does not need nation states to succeed. Bitcoin is already succeeding. Nation states need Bitcoin if they are going to want to survive. And that's, I think, the important thing. Politicians, Bitcoin doesn't need them, but politicians do need Bitcoin, and they need Bitcoiners, because Bitcoiners are rapidly increasing our political clout because our economic energy is growing. And again, this is a natural byproduct of Bitcoin's continued success. So we should expect that to accelerate. We should expect more nation states to look at strategies to accumulate Bitcoin. We should look at more companies to do the same. This was always going to happen if Bitcoin was going to succeed. There is no situation where Bitcoin can be the global reserve money, where we can experience hyper Bitcoinization, and somehow all of the nation states and all the corporations say, no, sorry, not interested. It just can't work like that. That doesn't make any sense. So while this was an inevitable byproduct, in my opinion, of Bitcoin's success, it should also be a wake-up call to people who are still not stacking sats to say, look, something's clearly happening here. If you haven't looked at Bitcoin yet, ask yourself why. Check your prior assumptions. Do a little bit more research. Listen to some more podcasts. Check your assumptions at the door, leave them there, and come in with an open mind. And realize that maybe there's a reason that this asset class has gone from $0 to $2 trillion plus in around 16 years. That's incredible. And then also realize that it still has the rest of the $1,000 trillion in global asset value that it's going to start eating up chunk by chunk. So you probably want, it may make sense to get some in case it catches on, to quote Satoshi.
Yeah. And I think it's like a 250x from here when it gets to 50%, which is kind of really weird to think about, to think about the scale of Bitcoin in the assumption that it gets to 50%. But you bring up something really interesting of like, it's inevitable that all the individual players and all the group players, institutional player, and also the nation state players will adopt it. Which brings me kind of to the thing where right now, I think we have done all the work. We have now banks on the Bitcoin side, like some of the banks, but not a lot. We have some institutions with MicroStrategy companies. We have ETFs. We have BlackRock. We have now starting some nation states. There's nothing really left to really unlock outside of 99% of all of them in individual categories. So what I'm getting towards is we've kind of laid out all the buckets and now we're just like trying to fill them, which is kind of where I'm seeing the future over the next 5 to 10 years, where we're just seeing more publicly traded companies getting in Bitcoin, more people getting in Bitcoin, more nation states getting in Bitcoin, more institutions, more ETFs, more products. Is that the way forward where we kind of laid the groundwork the last 16 years and now it's just like building on that with more education? That's why education, I think, is still, if you want to do something in Bitcoin, education is probably the easiest and the most important path. Like building a product and service around Bitcoin is a lot harder than just educating other people. And it's the most important thing that you could do. But the question I was trying to get is, how do you see the way forward from now now we got to 2 trillion in 16 years. How do we get from 2 trillion to like 100 trillion, like 200 trillion market cap? Is it just more of the same that we already have?
I think in terms of monetization, that's going to naturally happen now because the Overton window has been blown wide open. Bitcoin is in the conversation right now. At the highest levels down to the lowest levels, Bitcoin is part of this conversation. If you're managing any amount of money and you're not talking and thinking about Bitcoin, you're making a mistake. There used to be a career risk to bringing up Bitcoin. If you worked in some big company or you were managing assets for others, maybe there was a career risk to bringing up this magic internet money. Now there's a career risk to not bringing it up, to not doing your duty to educate others if you're managing other people's money, but also not doing your duty to yourself. Like it's not so much a career risk as it is a life risk, right? You're risking yourself being left in the dust as you sit on a melting ice cube of fiat and other inferior assets like real estate. And Bitcoin leaves all of that in the dust. The thing I wanted to say though is, so there's kind of the monetary side of this, let's say, in terms of just the monetization of Bitcoin as Bitcoin drains more and more value from the fiat system. A really important thing, right? I mean, always in the past, in the present right now, but especially as we go into the future, especially as Bitcoin right now is being viewed as this, just this digital gold. And I think that's fine that you can view Bitcoin as digital gold. You can think about it however you want. Bitcoin doesn't care. But Bitcoin is so much more than that. Like, gold is not a good medium of exchange. Bitcoin is an incredible medium of exchange. Bitcoin is weightless gold that you can send to anyone, anywhere, at any time, and no one can stop you. That is incredible. So I think that it's important to recognize that Bitcoin does need to be used as a medium of exchange, in my opinion, in order for it to truly reach its full potential and promise. And Bitcoin needs to be, I think its monetary premium is tied to its ability to be used as uncensorable money. Like, if you can't use Bitcoin in that way, I think a lot of that monetary premium is no longer justified. And so I think what is really important right now is for those who are builders to continue building incredible open source software. Folks like Callie, who's working on eCash with Cashew, and all of the things that have blossomed out of that, the Lightning Network as well. All of these different second and third layer technologies, Fediment, to give another example, these are really important because they also add different things. For instance, like in this case of Cashew and eCash, like near perfect privacy that does not exist on Bitcoin's base chain. It doesn't exist on layer one. Bitcoin is pseudonymous, but because of this incredibly destructive KYC AML apparatus, so many people have an ID scan tied to their Bitcoin purchases through Coinbase or through any regulated exchange. That's not a great thing. It's okay. It happened. It's happened. But having these other layers that allow people to transact, first of all, faster, cheaper, and then with much, much greater privacy, that's incredibly important. And I think it's also very important to support these other sort of tangential use cases of Bitcoin, these other protocols, for instance, Nostr. The fact that you can zap Bitcoin frictionlessly on Nostr to send value when you find something valuable in a social context, that's incredibly important. And having that censorship-resistant communication protocol alongside of a censorship-resistant monetary protocol is incredibly powerful, because we don't want to live in a world where, where I forget who said this, maybe it was American Hodl, but we're all fabulously wealthy, but like we're depressed because Bitcoin's honestly failed in some of its initial promise, which is to be able to give us an uncensorable, unfuckable money. Like that's we need that. Like, you are going to want that sooner or later. We are in the middle of a fourth turning. We are at a convergence of different cycles right now. Long-term debt cycles, fiat monetary cycles, Polybius's anacyclosis, Kondratiative waves, all of these different things are converging into this time, and we happen to be alive during it. What you want to make sure is that you have the tools at your disposal to weather the storm that is coming, because it is coming. There's not going to be any way around it. I'm bullish on the future of humanity. I'm bullish on the future that is to come. But it's going to be really messy to get there. And you're going to want to make sure you have the open source freedom tech tools like Bitcoin, like Nostr, like eCash to get you through that storm. And so that's one of the things that I want to beat the drum on, is that don't assume that we've won. There's a lot of work to do, and that work is being done right now. You may be paying attention to Bitcoin Treasury companies and Bitcoin ETFs, and number go up, and that's all, ingesting all of the, moon boy hopium that you possibly can right into your veins. But remember that there's a whole other far more interesting side of Bitcoin, which is the open source freedom tech that is being built all around it right now. And you would do well to pay attention to that, because you will need it sooner rather than later.
The first time I ever made any money, I got myself from that money a watch. And ever since then, I collect timepieces to remember times where I achieved some milestone. That's why I got the Bitcoin 2025 edition when I went to my first ever American Bitcoin conference. So for me, the Bitcoin watches from Coin Vigilante represents the time that we are living in. For every person that wears a Bitcoin watch, I know they are representing sound money to the outside world. Make sure to check out those amazing Coin Vigilante timepieces down in the descriptions. I love those watches so much. I know how big of a hurdle it can be to have self-custody, but it's so freaking important to make that first step. We have to make sure it's as easy and simple as possible. And that's exactly what BitBox did. BitBox created the simplest and the easiest hardware wallet to use to get into self-custody. So get yourself a BitBox down from the link in the description. And when you use code Robin, you even get a 5% discount. The most important thing for your Bitcoin journey is not buying Bitcoin, but it's how to keep them. And yes, you have maybe the right tools, but how do you actually go ahead and stick it all together so it's the most secure for you personally? Self-custody is a deeply personalized journey, and the Bitcoin way is helping you exactly finding that correct setup for you personally. They are also helping you with securing your own cybersecurity. And if you want to go one step above all that, you can even get a consultation for a Plan B residency. Go to thebitcoinway.com/Robin and you will get a 30-minute free consultation. I want to tell you about something very special to me. It's called Microseed. If you hold your Bitcoin in self-custody, and you should, you know how critical it is to secure your seed phrase. You should not have them on paper. You should not have them on anything else than titanium. With Microseed, you can engrave your 12 or 24 word seed phrase, the entire seed phrase, onto a 1-inch small washer. Yes, just one washer. All 24 words on that one washer. You can hide that thing everywhere. And even better, you don't need to buy a new kit every time you have to get a new wallet. You can make unlimited backups, because Microseed is not selling the washer. Microseed is selling the device that stamps the washer. So you get the full kit with the device, with the washers, with the hammer, with everything you need to get started today. And you can make with that unlimited amount of backups. Go now to microseed.io. Again, that's microseed.io to get your last backup tool you ever need. Pillars up. I recently made a small presentation for an African community about that. There's 3 main pillars that what value Bitcoin brings, and I might add a 4th one in there. The first one is the thing that you talked about, is the number go up technology, the ETFs, the treasury companies, the people that in previous cycle bought altcoins to outperform Bitcoin. So the number go up technology guys that don't care about the Bitcoin. They just care about getting rich. And like, nothing wrong with that. I like that my Bitcoin is going up. I really do. It's amazing. Yeah. Like who doesn't like that? But there's a second pillar that I think is even more important, is the freedom. It's the one where you can send someone in Colombia right now money, and you don't need to put all the KYC thing in there, and you cannot be stopped from that. And it doesn't matter if he's in Colombia, Australia, America, or India. It just does not matter where he is. It's just a freaking Bitcoin address. And like 50 other things that you gain with holding self-custody. But then there's a third thing also, which is super fun, is the value in being in the social layer of Bitcoin, being in the early movement. And this does not mean you have to have, as we two have, a Bitcoin podcast. This maybe mean you can though, but it means just like, maybe you do once a month a Bitcoin meetup in your local town. Maybe you organize a small Bitcoin conference. Maybe you just attend those things. Maybe my haircut gets weird nowadays. There's a guy in Germany and he goes to Bitcoin conferences and he cuts people's hair for Satoshis. And I love him. Like I always I now only go to him to cut my hair. Like I literally texted him yesterday, when are you coming to Vienna? I need you. My hair is getting too long. And like attaching yourself to the social layer is amazing. And then the fourth thing is the overall thing that I think Bitcoin, even if you don't benefit it from you individually, it's the good thing to do. It's the moral money. I don't like to do this argument because it's sometimes like it usually comes from the lefties and they're like, oh, like I have the best thing and that's why you should. Like I don't like that argument, but I feel like Bitcoin is the moral money and we should adopt it, even if we don't benefit from it personally. And so you have those four pillars. If you only focus on number go up, you only get one. You only get one. You get only 25% of the upside of Bitcoin, and that's. I'm really bullish on gaining as much exposure to Bitcoin, which also means not just like how much money you have in there, but like just in general, like do you do self-custody? Do you go on conferences or meetups? Are you engaging with the community? Those are all layers stacked on top of each other, which gives you exponential benefits if you use them all. So I love that you brought that up. That's an extremely important point.
Yeah, and you know, to play devil's advocate for both of us, because I think we're in agreement on the, you know, I like the breaking down into the pillars as well. We're in agreement on that. It's also though important to point out that number go up is a very good thing. Number go up is the most powerful meme that Bitcoin has. People see, because here's the sad reality: the majority of people do not care about open source freedom tech. They don't care about uncensorable money. They don't care about the fact that they may be at risk of financial censorship at some point. They don't care about any of that. What they do care about is their own personal bottom line. They care about whether or not things are getting more expensive for them over time or getting cheaper over time relative to the investments that they have. And so that number go up technology, that number go up meme, that is incredibly, incredibly important for adoption. And as Bitcoin podcasters, we know this. If you post a video or an episode with something that's even related to price mildly, it will get more views literally always than anything about cool open source freedom tech. And like, again, I think the price predictions, it's the least interesting part of Bitcoin once you understand Bitcoin, but it's also the top of the funnel. It's the piece that brings people into Bitcoin because of self-interest and greed. And that's okay. Like that's okay that that's the top of the funnel. It's just important that once you get into Bitcoin and you start learning about this, there is so much more than just number go up. Again, incredible meme, incredibly important. And I think Alex Gladstein was the one who said, NGU is a Trojan horse for FGU. Number go up is a Trojan horse for freedom go up. And I think that that's great. And it's so insightful because it's true. Number go up is what, you know, you come for the gains, you stay for the revolution. You know, you come for the number go up, you stay for the freedom go up. And that's really powerful. So I'm very, you know, grateful that Bitcoin has this incredible number go up technology, because it is what is going to bring people in. And also that number go up technology is a lot of what funds all the open source developers who are building the freedom go up technology. So you necessarily need both. But I think it's so great to highlight these builders, these developers who are doing the really incredible and important work to actually make sure that we have so that not just number go up, but we want freedom to go up too. We need freedom to go up too.
Do you have a concern that people might get complacent and just buy an IOU of Bitcoin because it outperforms Bitcoin maybe with 5% with like treasury companies. When you look at Strategy, for example, and it's so funny because I had Michael Seyr on my podcast. I was at his 100K party, and I've never bought a single share of Strategy. And I told this to many people, like, you're crazy, like you're so close, like why didn't you buy it? Like, because I like the way Bitcoin is working and not the fiat system. And a stock is still for me right now a fiat system. Doesn't mean I won't ever have stocks. I'm probably buy some stocks once Bitcoin is mature. But right now, I only want Bitcoin in self-custody, as I said before, to weather the storm. Do you think it is maybe a bad distraction, or maybe even something that could hurt Bitcoin in the medium term when people are very focused on treasury companies, on like number crop technology, and just like buying like different products around Bitcoin that are not fully in Bitcoin? And I want to just add one more thing is like even Seyr himself sells his own stock and buys Bitcoin. Like, it's like you see his strategy sells, like, because it's publicly recorded, like there's no secret. And he says like he's buying Bitcoin, like it's public record. But yeah, like how do you look at that, all the treasury companies and outperforming Bitcoin and just focusing on number crop technology?
Yeah, I think that it's natural, again, that people would be interested in trying to outperform Bitcoin so that they can ultimately acquire more Bitcoin. And hopefully that's their goal. If your goal is just to acquire more fiat, you still have some work to do. You're missing the point. Like Saylor's goal is not to acquire more fiat. His goal is to acquire more Bitcoin. You know, he's not issuing shares to get the fiat. He's issuing shares to get the Bitcoin. He's not selling personal shares to get more fiat. He's selling personal shares to get more Bitcoin. Because he understands Bitcoin. So if you are just chasing fiat gains, you know, if you play fiat gains, you're going to win fiat prizes. I think that is a mistake. Now you asked a question, which is a good one. Is this a risk to Bitcoin itself? Is this a risk for individuals? I think it is less of a risk to Bitcoin itself. Ultimately, what I think is people have done a lot of comparisons between these current Bitcoin treasury companies and all the hype around them, comparing that to the ICO boom and subsequent bust, or comparing it to the NFT craze or meme coins or whatever else. I disagree with that characterization, because I think that all of these Bitcoin treasury companies are ultimately, their strategies are accretive to Bitcoin's value. They are bringing more money, yes, through their equity vehicles, they're bringing it into the equity vehicle, but then they're putting it into Bitcoin. This capital is ultimately flowing through these companies and into Bitcoin, versus the altcoins, NFTs, meme coins, whatever, shit coins, just generally. They are sucking value that would have otherwise gone into Bitcoin into these other scams. And ultimately it benefits a couple of insiders who get fabulously wealthy, but they do it on the backs of everybody else who they rug. Now, in this case, you've got people who are going to get fabulously wealthy, insiders of these Bitcoin treasury companies. Maybe some people also that are buying Bitcoin treasury companies very early on in their process. But that capital is ultimately flowing into Bitcoin through this vehicle of the treasury company. And so I think that's a good thing for Bitcoin. Like, again, this was always going to happen. But it's good. I'd rather see capital flowing through Bitcoin treasury companies into Bitcoin than to see it flowing through altcoins into the pockets of altcoin scammer founders. And then they acquire a bunch of Bitcoin to it while they wreck thousands upon thousands of people in the process, and ultimately turn a lot of those people off from Bitcoin because they get a bad taste in their mouth from crypto. That's such a frustrating thing about all these things. Now, at the individual level, I would caution people, and this, I own some MicroStrategy. I own a couple other Bitcoin treasury companies. I think right now MicroStrategy is the only one that has outperformed Bitcoin in the time that I've owned it. I think there's going to be a couple of Bitcoin treasury companies that manage to outperform Bitcoin, let's say over a 4-year time frame. Like, there's going to be a couple. Probably MicroStrategy will, maybe a couple others. The vast majority of them are not going to outperform Bitcoin. And depending on when you buy them, you may seriously, like very drastically underperform Bitcoin. Now, I would just caution people that I view that as that's my base case, right? Could be absolutely wrong. Maybe lots of them outperform Bitcoin over a 4-year time frame. I don't think that's going to be the case. Maybe I'm wrong again, but I would caution people to, if you are listening to this and you're starting your Bitcoin journey, you should just do what Odell says, and you should stay humble and stack sats. You should buy Bitcoin. You should wait till you have an appropriately large UTXO, and you should transfer it to cold storage. And then you should rinse and repeat and continue doing that and bring value and create more value and just keep that strategy going. Be your own personal Bitcoin treasury. Now, if people want to speculate on Bitcoin treasury companies, they need to be aware that that's exactly what it is. It's speculation. There's also an important caveat to that, which is that in terms of people who are investing in this, there are massive pools of capital that cannot, because of various regulatory reasons, get exposure to spot Bitcoin. It's just not going to be possible for them. Then there's massive pools of capital. That's what MicroStrategy is tapping into with all of their different, Strike and Stride and Stretch and Strife. All of these different products that they have are tapping into those other capital markets that did not have a way to get exposure to spot Bitcoin and are looking for a different risk profile and a different investment vehicle. Ultimately, again, all of those instruments end up having capital flow into Bitcoin that wouldn't have otherwise gone into Bitcoin because it was trapped in these other markets with these traditional instruments. So you needed to create a pseudo-traditional instrument to be able to capture the value in those markets. Again, I think that's a good thing. I think that Bitcoin is eating the entire world. It's doing it through various means, various sly roundabout ways. And that's a good thing. But again, I'll repeat it again in case people didn't catch it the first time. I would be very careful with these Bitcoin treasury companies if you think you are going to be able to out trade Bitcoin, because Bitcoin, that should be your goal. Your goal should be, you don't want to hold a Bitcoin treasury company forever. You want to acquire more Bitcoin with it. So if that is not your goal, or if you are not doing that and you're trading back and forth between these things, I would seriously reevaluate your strategy, because you may look back in 4 years' time and realize that if you had just stayed humble, stacked sats, accumulated Bitcoin, created value, and spent more time with your family instead of focusing on trying to trade stocks, you would have ended up far wealthier in both Bitcoin value and in the value of the time that you've spent than you would otherwise.
And this is the big thing. I think this is actually the last thing is the biggest thing for me that you just said with the time investment. Because if you look into stocks, you cannot treat it as Bitcoin. You really have to look into every single treasury company again and see what are they doing, what is the management team saying, what is the underlying business, do they have something outside of the just buying Bitcoin as a strategy? Because I think that won't be enough for most companies. There might be a strategy, there might be another one that services those locked capital pools, but there won't be 50, 100 companies that do that. There will only be a few winners because it's a service-based business basically. And this is a big thing where there goes time into that. And I want to show you this. I just saw that a couple of episodes ago that priced in Bitcoin also has now priced Bitcoin treasury companies priced in Bitcoin. And I found it so nice, where you see actually most of the treasury companies are kind of down. If you look at Similar Scientific, the performance is down against Bitcoin. Meta Planet, yes, they're year to date up. Strategies this year actually down, which is surprising for me, but it is what it is. 1 year, 3 years, 5 years, of course, they're up against Bitcoin. And this kind of shows you it's not guaranteed that you outperform Bitcoin just because you do a Bitcoin treasury companies. You have to do the work, you have to do research, and you're probably better off just working, providing value, storing your value in Bitcoin, and then spending the rest of the time with family and friends. That sounds like a better plan for me.
Yeah, amen to that. And again, I know a lot of people that are working on these treasury companies, and they're great people, and they honestly want to see Bitcoin succeed. Obviously, this isn't to knock these treasury companies. Again, I stated I think that they're ultimately a good thing for Bitcoin, and they were an inevitable thing. So it actually doesn't really matter if I think that they're good or bad. They were always going to happen. I just really want people to focus on the fact that, look, you're probably not that good of a trader. I'm sorry to break it to you. You're just probably not. I'm not. Maybe you are, but odds are you're not. Odds are you are not going to be a better trader and outtrade the hurdle rate of Bitcoin, which is the best performing asset, right? You're just probably not going to do that. And that's okay. That's the whole point. You shouldn't have to have a second job where you're just watching charts and trading nonstop just to try to make a couple extra percentage points. What kind of life is that? Like, you should be able to work hard and do something that you enjoy. You should be able to take the fruits of that labor and save it, because Bitcoin is the greatest savings technology we've ever had. You should be able to save the fruits of your labor in hard money and then just live your life and not need to worry about watching charts day in and day out to try to scrape a couple extra percentage points to beat inflation and then to beat Bitcoin, because you may beat inflation, but odds are you're not going to beat Bitcoin. So something to think about.
And a lot of things beat inflation.
Yeah, right.
No, one thing that actually I just thought about when you said it with real estate is I see a lot of Bitcoiners actually wanting to own a home. And I think, and I have this weird theory that a Bitcoin world will actually encourage home ownership again, where people can afford homes because the monetary premium will get sucked out of it, and people will actually like to own their own homes, but there will be less people doing real estate and doing all those fiat things with real estate that most people are well aware of. It's kind of, when I look at what a Bitcoin world kind of brings, coming back to basics, is like it will bring more signal and more things to life that actually make sense, and you can just buy a home. You can just save up for a home and just buy it outright without fiat, without credit. And you can just do that the same way as you might have done it with a phone or a car. I mean, people even finance phones these days, which I think is crazy to do that. But yeah, it's kind of fun to think about what's possible with home ownership, because it's such a intimate topic to think about. How do you look at like home ownership and Bitcoin encouraging that actually?
Yeah, well, I think you're exactly right that as Bitcoin continues to reprice the world, real estate as an investment begins to be demonetized. It already is happening. If you look at the price of a home priced in Bitcoin, it is going down year, or let's say on a 4-year time frame, because maybe you pick any particular year that Bitcoin's doing some little fluctuations, whatever. But if you look at the price of a home versus the price of Bitcoin, or when priced in Bitcoin on a 4-year time scale or more, you see that the price of that home keeps getting cheaper and cheaper and cheaper when priced in Bitcoin. During the same time, if you look at it, a home priced in fiat, it's getting astronomically more expensive. Younger generations are being priced out of this housing market. Meanwhile, the boomers that bought their house for 2 pallets of raspberries back in 1970, and now it's worth $3 million. And meanwhile, it's a 50-year-old house that is completely, falling disrepair. Like, this is insane. Homes are not great investments. They're great for living in. Homes have great utility value to raise a family in, to, have a garden in your backyard, to raise animals, just to spend time in, right? To have a place that you call your own, even though you kind of rent it from the government a little bit. But that's a different conversation, right? But this, I think, is more and more people are going to realize that, look, if I want to be able to afford a home, then I need to be measuring my life in something where the home's actually getting cheaper. Because again, homes should be getting cheaper, right? If you're pricing them in sound money, and they are. That's what's happening with Bitcoin. I think that also there's, excuse me, it's great to see Bitcoin-backed loans becoming more of a reality, so that people have the ability to not need to sell their Bitcoin to be able to afford a home. Like, that's great. The home is getting cheaper in Bitcoin terms, and you'll be able to take out a loan against a small amount. You can already do this. It's not you'll be able to. You can already do this through multiple products that have weathered the storms of all of the Bitcoin-backed loan schemes that blew up in the SBF era, right? Like, loans aren't necessarily a bad thing. They can be bad when you're over leveraged, when they're done poorly, but like that's ultimately a good thing. You should be able to borrow against your Bitcoin if you want to, without needing to sell it, and also without needing to pay all the taxes on it, because that's another thing. You've got to sell taxes or sell your Bitcoin, pay a bunch of taxes on it, and then put that Bitcoin into a house that you know is going to keep losing value over Bitcoin. That's rough. By the same token, though, like if there's anything to you should spend spending Bitcoin is good. Like it's a good thing to do. The point of Bitcoin is not to just accumulate more Bitcoin forever. The point of Bitcoin is you can live the life that you want. Like the point of money is not just to acquire more money. Money is good because it is a tool for getting you what you want. That's the whole point. If you're thinking that your goal is just acquire more Bitcoin, and that's the only goal I have is just to get more Bitcoin, you're missing the larger point, that the point of Bitcoin is to give you the life that you want, to give your family the life that they want, to be able to build that future for yourself that you're dreaming of. And that's possible with Bitcoin. It's extremely, extremely difficult with fiat and basically impossible for the vast majority of young people today. So for young people who are listening to this, like Bitcoin is your chance to build the future that you want. It's not a get rich quick scheme. It's a build wealth slowly scheme. And that wealth building, accumulating Bitcoin, you are going to see that, again, as we said earlier, everything will get cheaper for you forever. Instead of being priced out of the housing market, you'll be able to get the house that you and your family have always dreamed of. And that's possible with Bitcoin. That is really, really difficult playing fiat games.
Fiat around, find out.
Yeah, I like that.
And this is the overall point of what Bitcoin promotes and what Bitcoin actually enables. I love that. I have one question that I asked each and every one of my returning guests. And the question is, what have you learned outside of Bitcoin since your last appearance?
That's a great question. I'm trying to remember the last time I was on your show, but I think it was prior to my son being born. If I'm remembering correctly, I think it was quite a while ago now. So what I've learned is that being a dad is the absolute greatest thing ever. I truly, all the cliches are true that, everybody tells you when you're about to become a parent, like, oh, you won't know until you actually are one. Then you'll finally get it. And you're like, okay, thanks for the advice. But it's really so true. It's like, I couldn't have imagined what an incredible journey this would be, how much having a son with my incredible wife would allow both of us to just have a whole new view of the world, to see it through their eyes, to see the joy and amazement that there is in seeing things and experiencing them for the first time. And also what I found is that since having a son, I've realized that I thought I had a low time preference before. I thought I had a zoomed out view of the future. Thanks to Bitcoin, I was enlightened. It turns out I had a pretty good view of the future and a pretty good low time preference, but it's nothing compared to what I have now. Because now there is actually somebody who will outlive me by a generation and will create more generations after him. Now I care so much more about what happens after I'm gone from this world. I care so much more about the future that I'm going to build for him and for our family, for any children that we have in the future, because now it's real. It's not just some theoretical thing where I'm talking about, Austrian economics and a low time preference and and what. No, it's real. Now I want to make sure that my family is taken care of long after I'm gone, and that I instill the values that will allow my son to take care of his family the same way. And luckily he'll be starting from a better starting point than I have, because he'll have Bitcoin. And that's probably the best gift that you can give the next generation, is the ability to have more freedom over their time. And how lucky are we that we're alive at this time right now, where we get to raise the first generation of Bitcoin natives, of true, it's Generation B, it's Generation Bitcoin. What an incredible thing. What an amazing time to be alive. What a great opportunity we have to actually raise the next generation of people who are going to remake this world in this bright orange future that is to come. And I'm sorry if that sounds cheesy, but I'm really stoked on being a dad. I'm very grateful to my incredible wife. And I'm just very grateful to have a happy, healthy son who gets to be raised in a Bitcoin standard. That's an amazing thing.
I love that. Generation B, the Bitcoin native generation.
Not Generation Beta, that's Generation Bitcoin, because Generation Beta sounds like that's lame. You got Generation Alpha. Now Generation Beta is like, oh, you don't want to be raising a beta, but a Bitcoiner, that's all right.
Yeah. So the current generation is like the ones that are born right now is called generation beta, actually.
I don't know if it's actually, if it's technically beta. I actually don't know if he's on the tail end of alpha. I should probably look into that, but I'm calling him generation B for Bitcoin. I don't care what the Census Bureau has to say.
I love that energy. Yeah, I 100% agree. But I cannot add anything as I'm not a dad. But I hear it all the time, and it's really interesting how family orientated the guests on my show are. It's something that comes up so many times that people are saying like, "Hey, Bitcoin actually promotes having kids," and it makes it so that you can actually do that, because there's there's like this view of like, oh, the future will be so bad, why put kids in there? Oh, I don't have money, like all those things. I think it's total BS. And I love that Bitcoiners are kind of against that and having a different balance on that, seeing like, hey, the future is amazing. I'm very bullish on the future, and I would like to influence that future. And with Bitcoin and with a Bitcoin native generation, we have really a chance of making something great possible. And yeah, I just like the positive outlook on life, and the low time preference thing that you mentioned. That probably hits really hard if you have a low time preference, but then all of a sudden there's a version of you out there that says like, oh yeah, he has probably like a few more decades to live than I have. That lowers your time preference right there.
It really is. It is crazy. Like, and it's amazing too, because it just gives you, I find that I have so much more of a drive to work very hard, to work with purpose, because my purpose has expanded, right? Like I wanted to be, before that, it's not like, I wanted to be a great husband, and to start a family. But now that we've started a family, it's like, okay, now like this, my purpose continues to expand. I have more reasons to do what I'm doing. I have more reasons to work hard to build something, but also to keep in perspective that like, it's, working hard. And again, acquiring more Bitcoin is important, but not if it's at the expense of doing what actually Bitcoin allows you to do, which is to spend more time with your loved ones, to have meaningful experiences. I don't like, you if you're still, you don't want to have that fiat mentality of like, you have to, keep grinding and hustling and doing all these things at the expense of your family and loved ones. I think that's incredibly misguided. Maybe some people don't want to spend a ton of time with their family and loved ones, and so they'd rather grind. Personally, again, I work because it gives me the ability to provide for my family. But I want to, and what's most important to me is working so that I can have the time with my family, but not relinquishing that time that I have with them in the present. Because wow, if there's another thing I've learned, it's that the time goes by really fast when kids are growing, from starting from zero. It is crazy how fast it goes. And again, everyone tells you this, but the cliches are all true. It's like you blink and they've changed. And so trying to remember to be present and to have that balance between your work and your purpose in building that future, but also the purpose that you have in being there with your family. Because again, nobody's ever on their deathbed saying, I wish I'd spent just a little more time at the office. It's like, no, you wish you spent more time with your family to a man, unless you're a raging psychopath. Like come on.
That's it. I love that. It's also, it's such an amazing thing, the regret thing, because it really, if you want to be thankful for something, imagine something being gone from your life and like, oh, how would I feel? Like, how would you feel like if your son is getting taken away or has dies all of a sudden? Like, oh shit! Like, I'm super grateful for my son.
Knock on wood right now.
Knock on wood, and it's like having that thing of being super grateful for those things that you have, and having that low time. I think it's amazing. I love that you brought that to the podcast, and thank you so much for that. As you know, we have a end routine where the previous guest is asking a question for the next guest without knowing who the next guest actually is. And the previous guest asked you the question, what's your definition of energy?
The force that powers everything, everything around us, I guess. I've started to think of energy in different terms now, because obviously, like, energy is life, right? Like very simply, energy is life. But it also has to be energy mixed with order to create life. Like, and you know this because the universe trends toward entropy, right? It trends towards disorder. Life is actually order. It's energy harnessed, and we know this because if you cut yourself, you have a gash in your arm. That is chaos right there, right? That's cells that were split apart. That's layers of your skin that were split apart. You're bleeding. There's chaos there, right? But because you have you are alive, your body knits that skin back together. You heal. You bring order to the chaos, and that's because there is this energy involved. But energy just by itself is, I guess, just trends to, it's just entropy. But energy combined with order, that's what life is. And then I think about it from an economic perspective, which is like, energy is what we have our time and we expend our energy, right? And I've thought a lot about, again, having a son. I was like, and what do you do that for? What is the purpose of expending your time, spending your time and expending your energy? What are you doing that for? And if you're doing it for pieces of paper that a couple of central bankers can print for free, that's insane. But if you're doing it for hard money that cannot be diluted, that starts to make a little bit more sense. And if you're trying to acquire that hard money and spend that energy that you have, spend that life that you're living to work for something greater than yourself, to work for your family, to work for your community, because maybe not everyone can have a family, then that's purpose. So I would say, energy is ultimately life, but it needs to be combined with order and purpose to really create a life worth living, if that makes sense.
It does make a lot of sense. And the energy debate is super interesting because if it all burns down, it's like it all comes down to energy. And it's super interesting to think about, what would you price energy in? And it's like, like Bitcoin is the obvious thing because it's directly related to energy with Bitcoin mining. And there's a social value aspect to the Bitcoin price. Is not just like how much it costs to mine it, obviously, but energy is so fundamental. And actually, Bitcoin led me down the energy rabbit hole more and more with Bitcoin mining and like how the infrastructure works and energy in general. It's super interesting. I'll just leave it at that, not to open at the last question, not a podcast episode. But I think energy is an underrated topic within the Bitcoin ecosystem. We don't talk about it enough. And Bitcoin mining is another one of those topics. If you put it in the title, nobody clicks on it. I don't know if you've noticed that, but nobody's interested in Bitcoin mining as a topic. It's something that we have to be aware of, and the energy topic is something that we should probably talk more about. Thank you so much, Walker.
It's energy is the ability to do work, right? Like that at a fundamental level, and like it's crazy that it's not talked about more. I think, on the Bitcoin mining side, it's like people assume that like somehow, this electricity just magically comes out of the outlets in their walls, and they don't think about how it gets there or what it means. And it's like that the energy rabbit hole is incredibly deep. Like it's one of those tangential rabbit holes that you go down the Bitcoin rabbit hole and you see this path off to the side and it's energy. And you're like, oh, what's that? That can't be too deep. And then you go down it and you're like, oh my God, load balancing and, all these things. And you're like, this is insane. But yeah, we should talk about it more because Bitcoin mining, if you're not mining Bitcoin, you're wasting energy. Again, to quote Gladstein.
I love that one. I have never heard that one actually.
It's a brilliant framing for it. Yeah.
If you're not mining Bitcoin, you're wasting energy. Man, thank you so much, Walker, for being on the podcast. Before I let you go, where can people find your podcast? Where can people find you and ask you questions?
Yeah, you can go to bitcoinpodcast.net. You can find me on Noster at primal.net/Walker, primal.net/Titcoin. For the podcast on X, it's Walker America and Titcoin Podcast. You can just search the Bitcoin Podcast anywhere, and I should come up, hopefully, if my SEO is good enough. I guess we'll see. Check it out. I would also say I only live stream my show on Noster. So if you'd like to see the show live, I encourage you to check out Noster, as I encourage everyone to check out Noster in general. If you enjoy Robin's show, hopefully you'll enjoy mine. I appreciate you having me on, man. It's love what you're doing. I don't know how you do episodes every day. It is super impressive, but really value the contributions you make to the Bitcoin space, and keep up the great work, man.
Thank you so much, Walker, for being on. Also, thank you so much for everyone that is watching and listening, for joining us today. As always, I'll be back tomorrow with another episode. Bye-bye. This content is for educational and entertainment purposes only and does not constitute financial advice.